The grand hall of the Stone Peak Pack was a riot of noise and scent, a swirling storm of perfume, ambition, and raw animal energy. It was the night of the mating ritual, and every unmated wolf from the allied packs had answered the call, drawn by the once-in-a-generation chance to catch the eye of the most powerful wolf alive, Corbin, the Alpha King. He sat upon a simple stone throne at the far end of the cavernous room, a mountain of a man looking profoundly bored. His dark eyes, the color of wet slate, scanned the crowd with a weary disinterest. He saw the same thing on every face that glanced his way, not admiration for who he was, but a hungry desire for the power he represented. They wanted to be queen. They did not want to be his. Jax, his beta and oldest friend, stood solidly beside the throne, a silent pillar of support. "You could try to look slightly less like you're awaiting a tooth extraction, my king," Jax murmured, his voice a low rumble meant only for Corbin's ears. Corbin didn't even glance his way. "They're like finely wrapped presents with nothing inside, Jax. I can smell the deception on them. It's cloying." He shifted, the muscles in his arms coiling with restless energy. The ritual felt like a pointless pageant. The line of hopeful Omegas seemed endless, each one parading before him, offering practiced smiles and fluttering eyelashes. A blonde one, named Briar, had practically purred as she passed, her scent aggressively sweet, like flowers left to rot in the sun. Corbin had simply given a curt, dismissive nod, and her smile had tightened into a grimace of fury before she melted back into the crowd. On the very outskirts of this glittering, noisy chaos stood Sage. He kept one hand lightly resting on the cool stone wall of the hall, a steady anchor in a world of shifting, unseen shapes. His eyes, a soft and cloudy gray, saw nothing of the torchlight or the finery. His world was built from sound, scent, and the memory of touch. He could hear the rustle of expensive fabrics, the nervous tapping of feet, the whispered strategies of parents coaching their children. And the scents, oh, the scents were overwhelming. Anxiety, hope, desperation, and ambition all mixed into a thick soup that made his head spin. He shouldn't have come. His older sister had insisted, had said it was his duty, that miracles happened. But Sage knew better. What Alpha, let alone the king, would want a blind Omega? He was seen as a liability, a weakness. He was here only to fulfill an obligation, to be officially rejected, and then he could return to his quiet life in the sleepy Sunfall Pack, where he knew every path and every voice. The line inched forward. Sage could feel the weight of stares, some curious, most pitying. He heard a few snide whispers quickly hushed. He focused on the feeling of the stone beneath his fingertips, memorizing its texture to calm his racing heart. He was so focused on maintaining his balance in the overwhelming sensory storm that he didn't notice the finely dressed Omega who deliberately, accidentally, dropped a bracelet right behind him. Briar smirked as she straightened up, melting back into the spectators, her heart thrumming with petty jealousy. She'd seen the king's disinterest in everyone else and foolishly thought removing the obvious outlier improved her own chances. The command came for the next group to approach the throne. Sage took a careful, hesitant step forward, then another. His foot connected not with solid floor but with the small, hard obstacle of the bracelet. There was no time to correct, no way to see the hazard. With a soft, startled gasp that was swallowed by the room's noise, he lost his balance completely. He braced for the painful, humiliating impact with the cold, hard floor. It never came. Instead, he was suddenly enveloped in a pair of arms so strong and secure they felt like stone pillars. A warmth radiated from them and a scent crashed over him, so powerful and distinct it momentarily erased every other smell in the hall. It was the scent of ancient forests after a thunderstorm, of deep earth and clean, sharp ozone. It was wild and powerful, but underlying it was a startling current of loneliness. It was a scent that spoke of quiet strength, not loud boasting. Sage froze, utterly terrified. He had fallen into someone. And from the sheer power radiating from the body holding him, it could only be one person. A dead silence had fallen over the entire hall. The music stopped. The whispers ceased. Hundreds of wolves watched, jaws agape, as their mighty Alpha King, who had not moved from his throne all evening, was now standing, holding the blind, fallen Omega as if he were something incredibly fragile and precious. Corbin had moved with a speed that blurred to everyone else's sight. One moment he was slouched on his throne, the next he was there, catching the boy before he even hit the ground. It was pure instinct, a reaction faster than thought. But now that he was holding him, a profound shock rolled through Corbin. The Omega in his arms was slender and he was trembling slightly. The clouded gray eyes were wide with fear. But that scent. Corbin inhaled deeply, unconsciously pulling Sage a fraction closer. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Where the others smelled of perfume and pretense, this one smelled purely of home. It was the clean, calming scent of summer rain on dry earth and the gentle sweetness of sun-warmed sagebrush. It cut through the fake flowery smells of the hall like a lightning bolt. And the feeling of holding him, it felt right. It was a deep, primal certainty that settled in his bones, a tension he hadn't even known he was carrying suddenly melting away. He looked down at the face tilted up toward his, seeing not weakness, but a quiet dignity in the midst of fear. He saw the delicate tracing of a scar along one cheekbone, a story he suddenly desperately wanted to hear. The entire pack was waiting, staring, but for a moment Corbin felt like he and the boy in his arms were the only two beings in the universe. Sage's heart was hammering against his ribs. He was waiting for the growl of anger, for the harsh words, for the rejection and ridicule. He tried to find his voice to stammer an apology, but the words died in his throat. The Alpha's hold was firm but not harsh. The powerful chest he was pressed against was steady. And that incredible, stormy scent held no trace of anger. Sage's unique gift, his ability to sense the truth of emotions, reached out instinctively. He expected to feel annoyance, impatience, or prideful irritation. Instead, he was met with a staggering wave of pure, unadulterated shock, followed by a deep, resonating sense of peace. It was the last thing he expected. Corbin finally found his voice. It wasn't the loud, commanding tone he used for addressing his pack. It was lower, deeper, meant only for the Omega in his arms. "Are you hurt?" The question was so simple, so unexpectedly gentle, that Sage could only shake his head mutely. Still not letting go, Corbin slowly, deliberately, raised his gaze from Sage to look out at his stunned pack. His expression was unreadable, but his voice, when it came, rang with absolute, final authority across the silent hall. It was a tone that brooked no argument, a decree from the throne. "The ritual is over." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. His grip on Sage tightened almost possessively. "This one. I choose this one." The journey from the thunderous silence of the grand hall to the hushed, sprawling quiet of the king's private wing was a blur of disorienting sounds and overwhelming scents for Sage. He was guided not by the rough hands of guards he had expected, but by the king himself. Corbin's arm remained a steady, unyielding presence around his shoulders, his touch firm yet inexplicably gentle, a guide rather than a restraint. They moved through corridors where the noise of the pack feast faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the echo of their own footsteps on polished stone. Sage's mind raced, trying to map this new, terrifying world through sound alone. The air grew cooler, cleaner. The cloying mix of perfumes was replaced by the simple smell of burning pine from torches and the faint, clean scent of the stone itself. And always, there was the storm and forest aroma of the Alpha King, a constant, powerful anchor in his swirling confusion. A heavy door swung open with a soft groan, and they stepped into a space that felt different. The air was still warmer. The echo of their steps died instantly, swallowed by what Sage sensed were thick rugs underfoot and tapestries on the walls. Corbin's arm finally left his shoulders and Sage stood frozen, listening, his entire body tense with the anticipation of something. Judgment perhaps. Or pity. He heard Corbin move away, his footsteps quiet on the deep rug, and then the sound of a heavy wooden door being closed, sealing them in. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. "This is my private receiving room," Corbin's voice came, not from across the space as Sage expected, but from much closer. He had moved back toward him without making a sound. Sage flinched, a tiny involuntary movement he couldn't suppress. He heard Corbin's breath catch, a soft, almost pained sound. "I will not hurt you," Corbin said, and his voice was low, stripped of all its royal command. It was just a voice, tired and surprisingly earnest. "You are safe here. This whole wing it is off limits to everyone but me and now you." Sage said nothing. He could only stand there, his head slightly bowed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. This had to be a trick, a cruel game before the real rejection came. He heard Corbin sigh, a soft exhale of frustration that wasn't directed at him, but at the situation. "The floor is clear between you and the fireplace about 10 paces straight ahead. There is a large low couch to your right, 3 paces away. To your left, against the wall, is a bookshelf. The windows are behind you and to the left, but they are shuttered for the night." He was describing the room. Not just stating what was in it, but giving him a map, providing distances and directions. It was such a simple, profound act of consideration that Sage's breath hitched. No one had ever done that for him before. People either guided him roughly or talked around him as if his blindness made him unable to understand his own surroundings. Why? The word slipped out, a fragile whisper. Why what? Corbin's voice was still close, patient. Why me? Why this? Sage gestured weakly with one hand, encompassing the room, the situation, the unbelievable fact that he was standing in the Alpha King's private chambers. There was a long pause. Sage could hear the fire crackling in the hearth, could smell the sap in the pine logs. He could hear the steady, strong rhythm of Corbin's heartbeat. It was a calm, powerful sound. Because when I caught you, Corbin began, his words slow and deliberate as if he were still figuring them out himself, the noise in my head just stopped. For years it has been nothing but noise. The demands of the pack, the complaints of the elders, the lies of those who want something. It is a constant storm. But when I held you there was only quiet. And your scent? He took a step closer and Sage didn't flinch this time. It smells like peace. It was the last thing Sage expected to hear. Power maybe. Strategy. A political move. But not peace. He had spent his whole life being told he was a complication, a problem to be managed. He was not peace. I am blind, Sage said, the words a stark, painful truth. I know, Corbin replied, and there was no pity in his voice. There was only a simple acknowledgement. Your eyes do not work. That does not mean you do not see. The word struck Sage to his very core. He had never heard it put that way. He fell silent again, but the rigid fear in his shoulders began to ease just a fraction. That first night set the pattern for the days that followed. Corbin, to the astonishment of his entire staff, did not return to his duties with a furious energy. He delegated much of it to a relieved and approving Jax, and he stayed in his wing with Sage. He did not crowd him, but he was always there, a steady, patient presence. He continued to describe the world around them. He told Sage about the view from the balcony overlooking the misty mountains, the colors of the tapestries on the walls, the way the light moved across the floor throughout the day. He brought him simple, delicious food and they ate together in silence that slowly became comfortable rather than strained. And they talked. It started with small, safe things. Sage told him about the Sunfall Pack, about the feeling of sun on his face, about his sister who was kind but worried too much. Corbin told him about the weight of the crown, the loneliness of command, the difficulty of knowing who to trust. Sage in turn began to reveal his own world. He explained how he navigated by scent and sound, how he could tell a person's mood by the cadence of their breath, how he could identify every herb in the kitchen gardens by brushing his fingers against their leaves. One afternoon as they sat by the fire, Sage, growing bolder, reached out a hand. May I? He asked softly. Corbin understood. He shifted closer on the couch. Yes. Sage's fingers were delicate and surprisingly sure as they traced the air until they found Corbin's face. He started with his brow, feeling the strong furrowed line of it. He traced the bridge of his nose, the sharp angle of his cheekbones, the surprisingly soft skin under his eyes. His fingertips brushed over Corbin's lips, and both of them held their breath for a moment, a spark of something new and electric passing between them. Finally, his fingers moved to Corbin's jaw, strong and set, and then into the thick, dark hair at his temples. When he pulled his hand back he was smiling, a small, genuine thing. Now I see you, he whispered. Corbin felt something shift and settle inside his chest, something warm and irrevocable. This was not an Omega trying to win a crown. This was a person trying to know him. Of course the outside world did not disappear. The mean Omega Briar was furious. Having been so certain of her own victory, she seethed at the rejection. She began to whisper, her voice a poisonous drip among the pack members who were already skeptical. She found willing listeners. The king is bewitched, she would hiss in the training yards. That blind thing is using some dark magic from his backward pack. He's made the king weak. How can a blind wolf be our Luna? He can't even defend himself. The doubts spread, a low undercurrent of discontent that even Jax's sharp ears could catch but not entirely silence. Sage, with his acute hearing, began to catch the whispers from servants who forgot to be quiet around him. He heard the words burden, and weakness, and mistake. The old familiar shame began to creep back in. He had started to feel something here, something warm and terrifyingly hopeful for Corbin. But was he ruining everything for him? Was his presence making the king he was coming to care for lose the respect of his people? One evening, as Corbin was describing the fierce beauty of a coming storm over the mountains, Sage interrupted him, his voice small. You should send me away. The room went utterly silent. Corbin stopped mid-sentence. What did you say? The pack, they doubt you because of me. Briar says, they say I'm using magic on you. That I'm making you weak. The words tumbled out, laced with pain. I don't want to be the reason your people lose faith in their king. It would be better if I just went home. He waited for the argument, for the dismissal, for the agreement he feared most. He heard Corbin stand up. He expected him to pace, to shout, to be angry. Instead, Corbin simply crossed the room and knelt on the rug in front of where Sage sat on the couch. He was so close Sage could feel the heat from his body. His storm and forest scent wrapped around Sage like a blanket. Look at me, Corbin said, his voice intense but soft. Sage tilted his head up, his cloudy eyes wide and worried. Do you feel any magic in this room? In me? Corbin asked. Sage reached out with his other sense, the one that felt the truth of hearts. He felt Corbin's emotions, strong and clear and unwavering. There was no deception. There was only a fierce, protective certainty. No, Sage whispered. No magic. The only thing I feel, Corbin said, placing his hand over his own heart, is here. It is not weakness, Sage. It is the strongest thing I have ever felt. They whisper because they are afraid of what they do not understand. They see your blindness and think it is a cage. They don't understand that while their sight is fixed on surfaces, you see straight into the heart of things. You saw into mine. He took Sage's hand in his own, his grip warm and solid. I don't care about their whispers. I only care about the truth I feel with you. Do not ask me to send away the only thing that has ever made this crown feel light. Sage felt the truth of his words, not just heard them. The warmth of Corbin's hand around his seemed to travel all the way up his arm and settle deep inside his chest, burning away the last of the cold doubt. The bond between them, that fragile new thing, pulled taut and strong, and in that moment Sage knew. He wasn't a burden. He was a mate. And he would stay. The morning after Sage's plea to be sent away, a change settled over the king's wing. It was a subtle shift, but to Sage's heightened senses, it was as clear as a shouted declaration. Corbin's scent, always that of a controlled storm, now carried a new, steely resolve. His footsteps, usually silent and measured, had a purposeful weight to them. The gentle, exploratory phase was over. The king had made his choice, and now he would secure it, not through force, but through an unshakable display of certainty. He did not hide Sage away. Instead, he brought the pack to him in small, manageable doses. First, it was Jax, who Sage already knew through the steady, loyal timbre of his voice and his scent of old leather and cedar. Corbin had him report on pack matters not in his study, but in the sitting room where Sage sat, listening. He would then turn to Sage and ask, "What do you think of the southern border dispute, Sage? The beta from Pine Watch pack claims we moved the markers." And Sage, who had been listening to the tone of Jax's voice, would tilt his head and reply. Jax's heart rate spiked when he mentioned the Pine Watch beta's name. He doesn't trust him. The beta is lying. Jax would let out a low chuckle of amazement. The kid's right. The scent of deceit was all over him. I just didn't want to say it without proof. Corbin would just nod, a small, proud smile in his voice when he next spoke. Next came the pack healers bringing their bundles of herbs. Corbin had Sage sit with them, and as they debated the uses of yarrow versus marigold for a deep wound, Sage, who knew every plant by touch and smell, gently corrected one of them. The silver leaf you have there, it's been mixed with nightshade. The stems are smoother. It's a dangerous mistake. A frantic inspection proved him right. The head healer, an old wolf who had viewed Sage's presence with skepticism, left the room with a new, grudging respect humming in his scent. Word began to trickle through the pack. The blind Omega was not a silent, pretty doll sitting in the king's lap. He was sharp. He noticed things. He had a value that was not based on the strength of his sight or his arm, but on the keenness of his other senses and the clarity of his perception. The poisonous whispers from Briar and her followers began to find less fertile ground. People were curious. This curiosity culminated in a summons from the Pack Council, the group of elders and high-ranking wolves who advised the king. It was a formal challenge veiled in politeness. They requested an audience with the king and his guest. They wanted to see this mysterious Omega for themselves, to test the rumors. Corbin agreed immediately. He dressed not in his royal finery but in a simple, dark tunic. For Sage, he chose clothes of a soft, deep blue wool, the color of the twilight sky, a quiet statement of value without ostentation. The council chamber was a room Sage had never been in, and the weight of its history and the judgment of its occupants pressed down on him as they entered. He could smell old wood, dusty scrolls, and the distinct sense of a dozen powerful wolves, most of them laced with doubt and sharp curiosity. He kept one hand lightly on Corbin's arm, not for guidance, Corbin had described the path to the central dais in precise detail, but for connection. Corbin's arm was a rock, steady and unyielding. The questions began, polite but pointed. About his pack, his family, his limitations. Sage answered them all with a quiet honesty that seemed to disarm them. Then Elder Magnus, a wolf known for his bluntness and his resistance to change, spoke, his voice a dry rasp. A Luna must be the strength where the Alpha is the shield. They must counsel and care for the entire pack. How can one who cannot see the fear in a pup's eyes or the weariness in a warrior's stance possibly hope to do that? A silence fell. This was the heart of their objection. Corbin began to speak, a protective growl edging into his tone, but Sage gently pressed his arm, a request for silence. He turned his head toward the elder's voice. Elder Magnus, Sage said, his voice clear and carrying in the hushed room. You are leaning heavily on your left arm. Your right shoulder pains you, a deep, old ache that bothers you most in the damp mornings. And you are worried. Not about me or the pack. You received a message from your daughter in the coastal pack before this meeting. Her scent is on the paper in your pocket, and it is laced with fear. Your heart has been beating too fast since you entered the room. That is the fear I would see. That is the weariness I would address. Should I ignore it because my eyes do not work? The chamber was so silent one could hear the ash settling in the hearth. Elder Magnus stared, his mouth slightly agape. The details were unervingly accurate. The old injury from a long-ago battle, the letter from his daughter whose mate was ill. How could he possibly know? Sage continued, softer now. I may not see faces but I feel hearts. I hear the catch in a breath that means a lie, the slight tremor in a voice that betrays anxiety. An alpha leads with strength. Perhaps a Luna can lead with understanding. I will never see a sunset, it is true. But I will also never be fooled by a false smile. The resistance in the room didn't just melt, it shattered. It was one thing to hear rumors of his ability, another to experience its unnerving accuracy firsthand. They saw not a blind weakling, but a potential Luna with a fearsome and unique gift. The scent of doubt in the room shifted, transforming into awe, respect, and a dawning sense of possibility. That evening, under a sky full of stars that Sage could feel more than see, Corbin led him to the secluded royal gardens. The air was cool and carried the scent of night-blooming flowers and damp earth. The distant sounds of the pack settling for the night were a gentle hum. What you did today, Corbin began, his voice thick with an emotion so powerful it made Sage's own heart ache. You didn't just win them over. You showed them a new kind of strength. You showed me. He turned Sage to face him, his hands coming up to cradle his face. His thumbs gently stroked the scars on his cheeks. I have spent my life looking for someone I could trust, he whispered, his breath warm against Sage's lips. I never knew I would find them by closing my eyes. And then he kissed him. It was not a claiming kiss nor a rushed one. It was a slow, deep, sealing kiss that held all the words they had spoken and all the ones they had yet to discover. It was a kiss of gratitude, of awe, of a love that had been found in the most unexpected of places. For Sage, it was the feeling of that first moment of being caught, drawn out into an eternity of safety and belonging. The world narrowed to the feel of Corbin's lips, the taste of him, the overwhelming rightness of it. A warm, tingling sensation spread from the point of contact throughout his entire body, a feeling of a lock finally clicking open, a bond snapping into its permanent, unbreakable place. When they finally parted, both were breathless, forever changed. The official ceremony a week later was a mere formality. The entire pack gathered, and this time there were no whispers, only a respectful, eager silence. When Corbin placed the Luna circlet, a delicate band of silver, upon Sage's brow, a cheer erupted that was so loud and genuine Sage could feel the vibration in the stones beneath his feet. He stood beside his king, his mate, not as a pity but as a partner. He had not been tripped into the king's arms by accident. He had stumbled into his destiny. And together they would lead their pack not just with sight, but with profound insight, a balance of strength and understanding that would become the stuff of legends. Their story, the story of the blind Omega and the lonely king, was just beginning. A new chapter of peace and prosperity was dawning for the Stone Peak pack, built on a foundation of a most unexpected but unshakable love. If you've been swept away by the love story of Corbin and Sage, and you want to be the first to know when new tales from the world of the Stone Peak pack are told, make sure to subscribe. Your support helps bring more of these stories to life.